Imagine this. A city like Venice, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, all delicate canals and history.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it's the stage for this huge, talked about, really lavish event.
Yeah.
We're talking Jeff Bezos' recent wedding, which kind of, sailed right into the middle of some big global issues. It's an image that really makes you think, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
So our mission in this deep dive is to sort of unearth all the complex layers that came out of this one event. We're going to really try and unpack the public reaction, the serious environmental questions raised, and just what it all means for society, thinking about wealth and power.
And to give you that full picture, we've pulled together some really interesting sources. We've got news reports on the wedding itself, quite detailed ones, actually.
Yeah.
Then there's a whole load of online commentary showing just how differently people felt. And crucially, we're looking at a big global survey from the Pew Research Center on economic inequality.
Ah, Pew Research. Good data there.
Exactly. So together, these should give us a really multifaceted look at how wealth, sustainability, and public feeling all kind of crash together today.
Okay, let's dig into the event itself then. The sources really paint a picture of, pure extravagance, right? We're talking Jeff Bezos' massive $500 million super yacht, the Kourou. Apparently it was like the main hub for everything.
The floating centerpiece.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a pre-wedding foam party on it. It's quite an image.
It certainly is.
The plan was for a 3-day celebration right there in Venice with about 200 high-profile guests.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, the Venice mayor, Luigi Brugnaro, actually commented. He confirmed the wedding, but said it would be, quote, respectful of the city's fragility.
Which is a statement in itself, given what happened next.
Right. What was the immediate reaction? Because it sounds like it was pretty strong.
Oh, it was immediate and very vocal.
Oh.
Our sources talk about protests planned by groups like No Space for Bezos.
No space for Bezos.
Yeah. And these weren't just, angry tweets. They were planning to march in the streets, even swim in the canals.
Swim in the canals, wow.
Yes, they explicitly called the wedding a symbol of inequality and overtourism. There was one activist mentioned, Federica Toninello, who planned to swim as her personal statement. It was a very sort of direct challenge to this display of wealth.
So you have these really visible protests, but then you mentioned some sources said locals actually welcomed the money it brought in.
Exactly.
That sounds like a real tension within Venice itself. How divided was the city on this?
That's a really key question, and it kind of shows a bigger issue, doesn't it? This tension in Venice, it captures this paradox we see globally.
Oh, so?
Well, you've got activists, some residents genuinely worried about, over-tourism, their quality of life, the city changing too much, prioritizing wealthy tourists over the people who live there.
Right, the long-term impact.
Exactly. But at the same time, you've got many Venetians, particularly business owners, who, as the sources point out, really welcomed the immediate economic boost. A big, lavish event like that brings in money right now.
So short-term gain versus long-term health.
Precisely. Bezos' wedding just threw that conflict into really sharp relief. It shows how cities are often caught in this bind, needing the money versus protecting their character and environment.
Well put. Okay, let's shift from the spectacle to, the literal hardware. The Kourou. You said it's the world's largest sailing yacht.
That's right. Largest sailing yacht currently.
Does that sheer size change its environmental impact compared to, say, other large boats, even if it has some green features?
Oh, absolutely. The scale is just fundamentally different. The Kourou specs are, they're pretty staggering. 417 feet long, costs $500 million.
Wow.
It's got things like computer-controlled masts, a glass-bottom pool, a movie room where the seats move, special glass walls for privacy, even an art room.
An art room on a yacht. Okay.
And don't forget the support vessel, the Aviona. It follows it around, has a helipad specifically for Sánchez.
Right.
But back to your point about the environment, Hakai Magazine, one of our sources, really highlights this. They say, look, all boats have an impact, sure, but mega yachts, their damage is magnified hugely because of their size and also how they're used.
How they're used. So it's not just about how big it is.
Exactly. Unlike, say, big cargo ships that stick to shipping lanes out at sea, these mega yachts tend to hang out close to shore. For the views, easy access to land.
Makes sense.
But that means their massive anchors can do real damage, like crushing Neptune's seagrass beds, which are, really important marine ecosystems, delicate stuff.
The egress beds, I hadn't thought of that specific impact.
Yeah, and there's another worry, too. New tech is letting these huge yachts get into places they couldn't before, shallow areas, rocky coastlines, places that used to be kind of safe havens.
Like where?
Well, the source mentioned Captacreas in Spain. It's a marine protected area.
Yeah.
10 years ago, no mega yachts. Now, they see them there.
That is a significant shift. But wait, you also mentioned our sources talked about the Kourou having ocean-friendly features. What were those?
Right. That's the other side of the coin. The sources do list some things. Special engines supposedly producing less smoke. Lights designed not to mess with sea animals. Systems to clean water before it's discharged. And using materials in construction that aren't harmful to the ocean.
Okay, so that sounds good.
Yeah.
But how does that stack up against the size and the seagrass issue you just mentioned? Can something that massive truly be ocean-friendly? Does our research give any sense of the balance?
That's the million-dollar question, or rather the $500 million question, isn't it? It's this classic situation. You have these ocean-friendly features, but set against the sheer scale, the operational impact. Some critics call it green bling.
Green bling.
Yeah, like the efforts to be eco-friendly look good, but they might be tiny compared to the overall footprint of just existing at that scale. Extreme consumption. It makes you wonder if luxury like this can ever really offset its own impact, even with good intentions.
A real paradox. Okay, let's broaden out a bit. This connects to wider feelings about wealth and power, right? Especially this idea that the super rich can maybe bend the rules.
Definitely.
Our sources picked up on some Reddit comments, for instance. Someone suggested the Italian government has a price that Bezos could afford. Basically implying, corruption or at least special treatment.
Yeah, and that feeling wasn't just a one-off comment. Another user posted something sarcastic like, what's the point of inhuman wealth if you can only buy the U.S. government? Geez, just buy all the government so you can have your party.
Wow. Okay.
That kind of talk definitely shows a deep cynicism some people have about how wealth interacts with political systems.
And amidst all this discussion, this criticism, we should also mention Bezos made a donation, right? $3 million.
Yes, that was noted in one source. It went to organizations involved in protecting Venice and its ecosystem, groups like Venice Climate Week and the Venice Sustainability Foundation. Now, that source presented it positively, but, the timing, making a large donation right when there's all this talk about climate, sustainability, the protests against his event.
Right. Some might see it differently.
Some could definitely see it as maybe an attempt to smooth things over, manage the negative PR, or perhaps influence local opinion. It just highlights how complex things get when private wealth intersects with public issues and perception.
Absolutely. So what does this tell us about public opinion more broadly, globally? Let's get into that Pew Research data you mentioned.
Okay, yeah, the Pew survey is really revealing here. It shows this incredibly widespread concern about economic inequality. Across 36 nations they surveyed, a median of 54% of adults said the gap between rich and poor is a very big problem in their country.
More than half globally. That's significant.
It is. And get this. In Italy, where the wedding actually happened, that number jumps way up. 86% of Italians see it as a very big problem.
86%. Wow.
And it's not just about the money gap itself. The survey digs into why people think this gap exists.
What do they point to?
Well, a big factor seems to be political influence. A median of 60% across all those countries believe that rich people having too much political influence contributes a great deal to economic inequality.
So a perceived link between wealth and political power driving inequality.
Exactly. Now, it's also interesting there are differences within countries, especially based on political leaning.
Like in the U.S.
Yeah, the U.S. shows a really big gap. 76% of liberals say inequality is a very big problem. But among conservatives, only 30%.
Huge difference. So the perception of the problem itself is politically polarized in some places.
Very much so. It points to, fundamentally different views on how economies should work and what constitutes fairness.
And looking beyond the present, what did the survey say about the future? How do people feel about the next generation's prospects?
Well, that's where it gets quite pessimistic, actually. Globally, a median of 57% expect children in their country to be worse off financially than their parents are.
Worse off. More than half the world thinks the next generation is heading for a tougher time financially.
That's what the data suggests. It's not just about inequality now. It's a real sense of anxiety, maybe even gloom about where things are headed.
That's quite sobering.
Yeah.
And does this translate into wanting change? do people just accept this, or do they want reforms?
Oh, they definitely want change. The survey found majorities in 33 out of the 36 countries polled believe their economic system needs either major changes or even complete reform.
33 out of 36. That's overwhelming.
It really is.
Yeah.
It signals a deep dissatisfaction across the board and a clear appetite for fundamentally different economic approaches.
Okay, so we have the big picture, the event, the environmental concerns, the global economic anxiety. But our sources also touched on something else, right? More personal reactions.
Yes, absolutely. Beyond the policy debates and the protests, there was this layer of commentary aimed directly at Bezos and Lauren Sánchez as individuals.
Like what kind of commentary?
Well, some of it was quite critical, even personal. Criticisms about their appearance or some people speculating about their relationship, calling it maybe a financial transaction, things like that. Okay. The less savory side of public commentary.
Right. But then almost contradicting that, there's also this acknowledged morbid fascination that some people admit to having with the ultra-rich. It's like watching a spectacle, a form of entertainment, even while perhaps disapproving. It's a really complicated mix of feelings.
Fascination, frustration, maybe.
Something like that, yeah. So if we try and bring this all together for you, our listener, this whole deep dive into one wedding, Bezos' wedding in Venice, it really shows how a single, very visible event can basically light a fuse.
Yeah.
It ignites all these huge discussions about, well, fundamental global issues. Economic inequality, how we treat the environment, the powers that comes with extreme wealth. It really throws a spotlight on those global anxieties about the future we talked about. You see this immense private luxury like the yacht, the party, right up against this widespread public feeling that things need to change, that priorities might be skewed. So for you, our listener, maybe something to think about is this. We live in a time with just unprecedented levels of wealth concentrated in a few hands, and information about it is everywhere, right? Instantly shared.
Right.
How does seeing these spectacles of extreme wealth shape how we all understand the big challenges we face as a society? And what do we expect for the future? How do we find that balance, if there is one, between individual freedom, letting people acquire and spend vast wealth, and our collective concerns? Things like fairness, equity, protecting the planet.
Big questions.
Definitely big questions. It's certainly something worth mulling over.